you're listening to this, I would just say to yourself, when you go to work and you work really hard and you're making a ton of money and you're saying, I'm doing it for the kids, just stop and ask the kids if that's what they want. And then you'll probably say to yourself, that's not really what they want. Hello and welcome to the Julie and Gino podcast. My name is Gino Barbaro, and on today's episode, by the way, Julie's on my side here, baby.
I am.
Paul Sullivan. He's the founder of the Company of Dads, a groundbreaking platform for lead dads, men who take the lead at home while supporting their parents' partners' careers. That's really cool. Longtime New York Times columnist, Paul became a lead dad in 2013 and launched this mission-driven media company in 2022. Through community, content, and corporate training, he's shifting how we view caregiving. He's also the author of 2 books and co-host of Bright Horizons Work-Life Equation podcast. Welcome to the show, Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
I'm going to jump into your book. You said it was nominated top. I'm going to put it up for the viewers on YouTube. Thin Green Line, Labor of Love, right? Because when you're writing this book, it's chock full of really incredible stories. Having to sit through some of those interviews sounded painful with some of the people you have to deal with. But, what made you want to write the book?
I'm going to figure it out. I was a Wealth Matters columnist for the New York Times for 13 years. Before that, I created a wealth column at the Financial Times. And I was always interested, so many people who write about money, they're interested in, the big shiny object, the yacht,
the deal.
The 20,000 square foot house, whatever. I wasn't interested in that so much as I was interested in, how much does it cost to maintain the yacht? How much does the fuel cost? How many people do you need on that yacht to go and do something? Sure. What's your electricity bill in a 20,000 square foot house? What's insurance like? And I wanted to figure out the nuts and bolts because I'd learned in my course of being a columnist for 2 great papers that some people not only made money, but they held on to the money. And then they did really smart things with this, while other people seemed to be incredibly rich, but, the money all went away. And I wanted to sort of dissect it. And that really was the start of the idea that propelled me to write the Thin Green Line.
Baby, I need to ask one more question for this because I got like 17. I have 17 questions because Paul and I think on the same level because we both come from middle class. We think about the burn rate. We don't think about what it costs. We think about what it costs to carry. That's important, I think. And what do you do? How do you define wealth? But also tell the listeners why the Thin Green Line. I want to put those 2 questions in because I think they're so important because wealth to you, maybe wealth definition, maybe something to somebody else.
Yeah. And so I'll answer the second part first. And that's, what's the Thin Green Line? And if you think of the S&P 500 from the 1980s to today, it goes up. But it doesn't go up as a straight line. It kind of goes zigzaggy line as it rises or dips and falls. Keep that in mind for my definition of wealth because I make a distinction between people who are wealthy and people who are rich. People who are wealthy, whether they have a ton of money at the tippity top of that line or less money toward the bottom, are people who are able to make the choices they want to make in life. And so I'd always tell the story. I interviewed John Huntsman Sr. His son was a governor of Utah, was an ambassador to China. But John Huntsman Sr. made billions and billions of dollars in plastics. The clamshell package that holds a Big Mac, most yogurt containers you've ever had, packing peanuts. We all hate packing peanuts at the holidays when they show up and get stuck all over our house. He was wealthy by everybody's definition, but he was also able to make all the choices he wanted. And for him, he was the first guy ever to give away $1 billion to charity, and he focused on cancer research. On the other end of that line, somebody who I also consider wealthy is my Aunt Carol. My Aunt Carol was a school teacher. Her best friend is a nun. Talk about somebody who never gets into trouble. But if she wants to go out, she and her best friend, Sister Mary, they can go out to dinner whenever they want. Once a year, she takes a trip that anybody would be happy to take. She goes to Spain or she takes a cruise. She is also wealthy, even though she doesn't have the same amount of money as somebody like John Huntsman Sr. She can do all the things she wants to do. That is wealthy. Now, the other side of that is rich. Now, if you're at the bottom of that Thin Green Line, we have a lot of people who are economically disadvantaged in the world. They're struggling to make ends meet. But you could be at the tippity top. You could have that yacht. You could have that giant house. You could have a whole bunch of fancy cars, but you are super leveraged. And nobody knows you're super leveraged, but you're so leveraged that at some point, you won't be able to make choices. Choices will be made for you. And that is the person who is rich. And that's really, the difference between wealthy and rich.
Hey, Julia, Paul described the S&P 500 as going up and going down. That sounds like our marriage over the last 20-something years. Some days amazing, some days it's just like, Gino, please leave. I don't want to be around you.
Like we're in a good up time.
Yeah, it's
right
uptime. It's good. Yes, it's sunshine and rainbows right now, but it's not always sunshine and rainbows. Hit me, baby.
I'm not sure where that's going.
I don't know. Who's the therapist here? Am I doing the therapy? What do I do? Get it all out. Get it all out.
Well, that's what these are, because when it comes to money, money's the symptom. Everyone thinks that money's the problem. I promise you, make more money. It's not going to cure whatever's going on in your life. If your marriage isn't great and you make more money, it's not going to change the dynamics. And that's what I love about what you write about and why the book resonates so much with my community, with our community, with our family, and with people who want to be on that thin green line on the other side of that.
So let me throw something in there. You made a good point there. When you talk about, money, I say that money is like gasoline. If you have a lot of money, just as if you have a lot of gasoline, if you have a lot of gasoline, you can put it in your car and you can drive a long way. You can drive comfortably for a long way. You don't have to worry about anything. You have lots of gasoline. It'll take you wherever you need to go. Conversely, if you have a lot of gasoline, you can also set yourself on fire and cause more problems you could ever imagine. You think of money as that's how a good way to think about money. It can enable you to do whatever you want in life, but if you have other things going on, or you don't know what you want in life, it can also cause a lot of havoc.
Paul, I always say, and I've always heard from my mentor saying, money doesn't corrupt, it just reveals. And that's something that's very, very, to me, when I made more money, I didn't go out and spend it in ways. I just amplified more of what I wanted from it. It didn't corrupt me because that wasn't my mindset to go out and to use it in certain ways. When I had money, I had more of a generous outlook. I was able to help others. I was able to create the education platform and write books and create impact that way. So if you're listening to this, don't think that money is going to make you bad. It's only going to reveal more of what's inside of you.
Years ago, I got to interview John Bogle, who was the founder of Vanguard Fund. Yeah. And he had written a book called Enough. And he had sort of this rivalry with the founder of Fidelity and Ned Johnson. And they had two very different outlooks on life. And Ned Johnson is a billionaire, plenty of money. I think John Bogle died and maybe he had $70 or $80 million, which is a ton of money. Like, let's not be.
That's it?
Exactly.
The guy is revolution. He started the low fund. I mean, the guy should be worth 70 billion, not 70 million.
Yeah, but if you're starting, low cost funds, you're not clipping, you're not taking
yes.
But he had such a sense of enough in his life. Like he could do everything he wanted to. Again, for everybody else in the world, $80 million is a lot of money.
Yes.
$8 billion is more money, but he had this sense of enough. And that is so important when you think about money. Like, do I have what I need to do the things I want to do? And if I have extra, what am I going to do with that surplus? Like you said, people are inclined to be charitable. If I suddenly had, if $10 million fell in my lap today, I'd obviously, pay off my mortgage and put some more money aside for my kids' education. But then I would have so much fun, so much enjoyment giving it away because I love how can I help people? Where I went to high school changed my life. I would love to give them $1 million. There are other people. I have neighbors where I live. If they got $10 million, they'd buy more fancy cars. They'd buy they'd start flying net jets everywhere. And so it's just again, it's like you said, it amplifies who you are.
Julie, the question is, what would you do with the $10 million?
Yeah, I'd have to sit there. I'd have to think because my worry is, what if I spend it wrong? So that's what I
spend it wrong. There's no way to spend it wrong, baby.
Yes, I would do a lot of charity.
Okay,
100%.
Okay. Would you at least give me some, baby?
Yeah.
Charitable for your husband?
I don't know. You've been such a
I'm the tyrannical. Okay, I got you. I feel you, baby. I feel you.
Of course, I would give it to you.
Thank you.
We would do everything together,
Yes,
of course. And Paul, I love what you're saying with Gino, and it always comes back to the home. So when we're home, it's easy for us to teach other people in the world, right? There's no emotional connection. But when we're trying to teach our family at home, our children, exactly what you're talking about, does things change? Like what is the dynamics at home around this topic with your three and even your wife?
And you said you have 6? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's right.
So you really have outdone me here. You have double the number of kids that I have. If there's one thing I'm sure you've seen over the years with all of your kids, as I see it with my kids, is they're far less likely to listen to what we say and act on it than they are to watch what we do. And once they get to a certain age, they become what I call hypocrisy-seeking missiles. So if we say something and do the opposite, they will never forget that. And so it is incumbent upon us, and it is so important for us to always, be mindful that if we're telling them they need to make good decisions around money, that we model that we're making good decisions around money. But I'll tell you this funny story. My oldest daughter, years ago at our house, and there was this massive storm. We had a pool, everything was in the pool, massive. I pulled the filters, you pull in all the junk out of the filters, and there is a turtle in the filter. And I picked the turtle up and I carry the turtle down to the stream behind my house. My daughter thought I was the greatest environmentalist since John Muir. And I lived with this for years, the halo effect, years. You remember when you saved the turtle? What is else going to do with the turtle? I felt bad. There's a turtle. He's stuck in my pool. Fast forward, she's getting her first phone, and I'm sitting at the Verizon store, and we've just passed the hour mark. And the person helping me is just not getting it, just not capable. And I've lost my patience. I'm like, I would now like to get the phone and get out of here. Can we speed this up? Going forward, I'm the worst consumer the world has ever seen. Like, Dad, remember when you were salty with that woman? You were so salty to her. What are you doing? Like, can we go back to me being John Muir? I want to be that.
So
but
that's the S&P for you, right? Is that the S&P for you?
There you go. But that's an example of, the kids are watching what we're doing. And so that is just so essential, around money, but around everything. If we want them to be good human beings, we have to be good human beings. If we, go to a hotel, John Huntsman Sr., I told the story before, but when he went to University of Pennsylvania, when he'd go back he was on the board, go back to read, he would tip everybody $100. Everybody he saw, because $100 to him is like a nickel falling out of my pocket, and it made no difference. And people come to, but he always tipped them and then shook their hands and said, how are you doing? And, try to remember. Now, that is aligning something good with being a good person. If he had, or anybody had, like, throwing $100 at somebody and said here and walked away, or never made eye contact, never shook it, your kids would have a much different sense of money and that connection of money and goodness and charity and giving. And so you really have to marry the two if you want that message to sort of really sink in.
I know you wanted to ask about the dads thing. I'll let you jump in.
No, tell me about the dad. Tell the listeners about the dad circle you've created.
So the company of dads. So my dream, growing up, and I think, you were generous to say that I grew up middle class. I'd say I grew up at the lowest part of lower middle class. And, my parents, were bad at being married and even worse at being divorced. And my goal in life was to never live in my hometown again, which I did by going to this place called college and never returning. And the second part was to write for the New York Times, which I was able to accomplish. In 2008, I became a columnist, and it just was amazing. 2009, our first daughter was born. 2010, my first book came out. 12, our second daughter. This is better than I could ever have imagined my life being. And my wife in 2013 said, I want to start my own firm. She works in asset management. And I said, you got to do it. Like, this is, my life is so good. You do it. Take a chance. What's the worst thing that happens? It doesn't go well. And in a couple of years, you get another job. And she said, but if I do this, I'm really going to be full out, and it's going to be hard for me to help with the girls. And I said, I got it. I'll become the lead dad. And that was the term that we used in our house, is I was the go-to parent. Now, I was still working full-time at the New York Times. I wrote a second book that came out in 2015. As I said, I weaseled my way into being the sixth-string golf writer for the New York Times. That was my, moonlighting, because I love golf so much. And it went great until 2020. And when all of the sort of the structures we had in place, school, camp, when they fell apart, I began to think, like, what is there for guys like me? So, because let's be honest, from 2013 to 2020, I was what I now call an undercover lead dad. Because in my town, all the caregiving seemed to me to be done by moms or nannies or au pairs. At work, I was afraid to raise my hand or mention that I was a lead dad, because I didn't want to seem like not 100% committed to my job, which is crazy, is my own insecurity, because many of my bosses were working moms, and I'm sure they would have understood. But really, it was COVID, when all these structures went away, that sent me down on this quest to sort of find something for dads like me. Like, I'm not a stay-at-home dad, nothing wrong with that, but I'm a dad who's super involved, and I want to be able to talk about these things. And so I did what you do as a journalist, and I found, doing a little bit of research, about 25 million men in the United States are lead dads. That's a third of all fathers. A third of all fathers is being driven by guys in their 20s and 30s who want to work and live differently. I'm, the next group, 40s and 50s, that's where I fall. I knew that COVID would change how we worked and lived. I saw it was already happening, working more remotely, working, more intentionally. And that, okay, what is here? And I spent the next 2 years, really thinking about it and making sure that there was something there. And with the support of my wife in 2021, I left the New York Times, started the company Dads in 2022. And we do three things. We provide media, so a podcast, weekly newsletter, a feature called the Lead Dad of the Week that just highlights guys stepping into this role and also highlighting how diverse that group is. Second part is community, both online and in person. And how we make all of our money and how we keep this going is we do corporate education. So we do workplace development, and we help companies around manager training, around parenting groups to get dads in there. So it's just not, we say, like, if 100 people show up right now, 98 are going to be moms, and the 2 dads that show up, they don't need to be there. They're already doing all the right thing. How do we get those other 50, 60, 70 dads in the workplace who should be part of that parenting group but have been previously afraid to go because they thought they'd be called out instead of being called in? And so that's what we're really been working on. We're about to break some news here. My agent is selling the proposal for my 3rd book. It's going to be all about what I've been doing the past 3 years with the company Dad.
What are some of the things that dads are struggling with right now that you can help them out with?
And the one thing I want to say is, everyone knows bashes COVID, and it was an awful time, but there was a lot of good that came out of it. And something like this is something that's good. I think it made us think outside the box a little bit.
It certainly did. And like a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, a lot of stuff that companies are doing differently now is all stuff that was percolating. Boston College has been doing research. They can trace it back to like 2013, where they saw this shift around, men wanting to be able to take parental leave when they had kids. That wasn't happening before. And so all of this was happening under the surface. COVID just brought it out into the open when suddenly so many people, or at least people who could, were working in their homes and kids are everywhere, and they'd figure it out. The other, when you say, like, what are some of the things that dads are struggling with? I mean, a lot of it revolves around language and identity. And that's why we use the term lead dad, because it's very proactive. It's something you can rally behind, because before, terms for a man who would help out or support his wife, you get called Mr. Mom, you got called the house husband, people said, oh, what, are you retired? And it was all very pejorative, and it wasn't something you wanted to really be a part of. And so we work hard to sort of expand the definitions of words that have held men back from being more involved, particularly when they want to be. So a big example of this is the word provider. For decades and decades and decades, the word provider, as applied to a man, means the person who goes out and makes money. That could be true, but it's a very limited definition of provider. It's not like you go out, make money, drop it on the living room floor, and go about your business and go make more money. You want, to take that definition of provider and make it broader and more expansive. You're providing love, you're providing support, you're providing a safe home, you're providing, a role model for both your sons and your daughter. So it's really, looking at a lot of these words and how can we make them so that they're more inclusive, so that men feel like, hey, I want to be part of this. And one of the best part of, my week is, when some guy reaches out who I never would know otherwise and says, hey, I heard about what you're doing. I'd like to be a part of this. Can we talk? I just went before our podcast today and had coffee with some guy who happened to live a town over. Somebody sent him another podcast I was on. He's like, this is me. I'm a lead dad. This is what I do. And it was awesome to make that connection, because like everything, you want to feel like you're part of something. Like if you root for a football team, you want to go and say, okay, hey, you guys all root for the fill in the blank, the Giants. We're all Giants fans. This is what we're trying to do with the company Dads. It's crazy. So like, hey, we're all lead dads. Let's come together and discuss the good and bad of being a lead dad.
I think that's what men really need. We need community, because it's very difficult. And part of the problem is the patterns that we created from previous generations, where they had patterns and we adopt our patterns unknowingly, unconsciously. Sometimes we don't want to admit that we're like our parents, but most of us are. We get those patterns. So if your father was the type that would go to work and just not really play with you or not hang out with you, even though he didn't mean to, that's just the way he was raised. All of a sudden you adopt that, and unconsciously you think that, and you're working harder because you think the kids want that. If you're listening to this, I would just say to yourself, when you go to work and you work really hard and you're making a ton of money and you're saying, I'm doing it for the kids, just stop and ask the kids if that's what they want. And then you'll probably say to yourself, that's not really what they want. They just want to play Barbies.
The number one things that kids want is you.
It's your time.
Your time.
Yes.
100%. Ultimately, they don't want the big gifts. They want them because they're fun, but they ultimately just want us.
So they want that, but what do they need, baby?
What do they need?
Yeah.
Yes.
What are they craving, desiring? Yes.
And every time the kids act up, Now my older kid's like, Laura needs attention. She's kind of being annoying. I'm like, all right.
So can I just be annoying now and give you? That's what I'm going to do. When I get off this podcast, I'm going to be annoying, Paul, so I can get some attention. I mean, I'm annoying without having to.
Tell me
annoying.
how that works out for you, Gino. I can't wait. Send me an email. Tell me how that works out.
I'll let you know right after.
I love that. I love that lead dad because it does change the thought process in a sense. I was thinking more of not so much lead, but guide. And what did we talk this morning? We're getting a new donkey, calling him Guido.
Guido.
Which means
wait, you're getting a new donkey?
Yeah, we've got 2 donkeys, we got cows, we got chickens. Yes, mini donkeys.
We've become obsessed with these things. I just ordered 3 yesterday.
Yeah,
I was really proud that
you ordered 3. You can order donkeys online?
Well, they're about an hour and a half out.
Yeah, it's farms.
So they're going to bring them tomorrow. I don't know. Something's wrong.
So, Paul, it's actually...
I just had my 50th birthday, and I think I'm having a crisis.
No. It's actually interesting. Some backstory. I wrote a book about 6 months ago. It was called Happy Money, Happy Family, Happy Legacy. And I always had fear and uncertainty around money for years. And I started making a ton of money. And I started saying to myself, let me enjoy it. It was hard for me to enjoy it as a middle-class person, as somebody who was always saving.
Mm-hmm.
There's always scarcity. So now I've got some plenty. The kids really enjoy it. It's a great way to bond with the kids. And to me, we bought a farm. And to me, that's happy money. And I can do it. I'm not leveraged. I'm not being irresponsible. It's something for my legacy. So the kids all get together. We have great parties there. And now we got Guido, we got Antonio, we got Daisy, we got 30 chickens. And it's awesome. Guido and Ciccio. They got to be Italian. If I got to, I'm not going to name them like, any Irish names. They got to be Italian.
They're like big puppies that just want to be loved.
He's at a loss for words over here.
I'm going to write this down. This doesn't ever happen to me. I honestly, I have no idea what to say. Where do we go from here? How do you recover from the mini donkeys? I don't even know where this podcast is going to go from right now. But ask me anything. The donkeys, I don't know.
Well,
that's the thing. If your wife is looking for something fun to do, buy her a mini donkey. Because they're just so lovable and sweet, and you don't have to spend all the time like a puppy. We see them every day, and then we go home, and they're fine.
How big are they? How big do they get?
They're like, so their backs are about 31 inches.
Yeah.
Oh, they're small.
How much do they weigh?
200 pounds.
A couple hundred pounds.
Yeah.
So you think of Eeyore. You got to be careful with donkeys too, because Eeyore. Remember, Eeyore's sad. You can't give them too much sugar because then they get overweight and they start having issues and all that. So you got to be really careful.
So the donkey is this: if you give them things they're not supposed to have, which is exactly what Gino said, too much fruit. Anything other than grass and hay, they gain weight and they get depressed.
Something you didn't know.
Eeyore is real.
100% no. I did not know any of this.
We're learning this too. But I'm like, okay, people are like that too.
So you know where we can go with this? We can go with this from the money aspect. Yeah. And money is just an amplifier. Like I looked at money as legacy. I want to leave money to the next generation, but I also want to leave my values. I want to leave something where they look at it and go, this is really cool. Something we can do together as a family. Exactly. And it is awesome. Gives them responsibility.
A family bond for sure.
Yeah.
I have to say we're in a rut, the family.
Paul, when you go big, we go big. You know what I'm saying?
I'm listening to that. Yeah, it could leave. The donkeys could translate family values.
They live like 40 years.
That's a problem. They could outlive you. And then your kids are going to be like, what kind of jackasses were our parents? They're jackass. They got jackass. Like, this is what kind of literally when you talk about jackassery, that is in your backyard right now. You've got 3 mini donkeys. There's a money lesson here. That we have 3 dogs. None of them are as big as a mini donkey. But they run around our yard and they do what dogs and donkeys do, and that is they poop. And so we have, and my wife and I are both working and we don't want to pick up the poop. And our daughters, one of them has said, okay, how much would it cost to have one of those bougie, doggy do not poop pickup places? I was like, I don't know. It was like $25 a week. And she says, okay, for $20, I'll pick up all the poop. I was like, all right. That's fair enough. And so she does it. So you have something for your 10-year-old. If your 10-year-old feels like she's not getting enough attention, you can put her on donkey do duty.
I didn't expect this podcast to be so good.
No, did I? I didn't know where it was going. So it's a money lesson. Not all jobs are easy. Not all jobs are enjoyable. Some of them quite literally stink, like donkey do duty. And so, throw her $20.
And when I'm there at the farm, I have the kids cutting the grass. I have the kids doing jobs. And they're like, I don't want to do this, Dad. I don't like it. So I'm like, good. Go to college, get an education, make sure you don't do this. I think that's one of the lessons.
But at the same time, it's also good for them to do things. And that's something part of the just working in general and learning that grit is do stuff that you don't like to do. Mm-hmm. And it's 95 degrees and humid here in Florida with bugs.
Yeah. So this is actually, it's actually interesting because for you being at a loss of word, that's pretty incredible. You're an author, you're a columnist, been doing this for
Public
20 years.
speaker,
Speaker.
hundreds of talks. Yeah.
So I'm going to steer back in. I'm going to give you, I guess, some boundaries. Legacy. I mean, I hit the word legacy. How do you talk about legacy with your children? And you've been around people who are extremely wealthy. Some people love to give it all away. Some people love to die with it all. Where do you land on this? And what would you like to teach your children about legacy?
Again, it'll come back to what I said earlier about it's, what we do and what they see us doing. And we're quite transparent. Like when I wrote that book, when I was at the Times, I talked to people all the time who said, I'm not telling my kids anything. I'm not telling them how much I have. I don't want to disincentivize them. I want to make sure they work hard. And I said, well, have you ever heard of this thing called Zillow? Like, of course I know about Zillow. It's like, well, if you type in your address on Zillow, it tells the world how much your house costs. And, what kind of car do you drive? It's like, oh, I drive a Range Rover. It's like, okay, if you type in Range Rover in the year, it tells your kids how much the car costs. And, you go down the list. Where are you going on vacation? What do you do? They can figure all this out and they can, reverse engineer how much money mom or dad have. Now, mom or dad may be wealthy or rich. We don't know how leveraged they are, but they can reverse engineer. So would you want your kids to guess about this? Or would you want to educate them? I mean, no parent in the world would never have the birds and the bees talk with their kids. You would be a bad parent. If a parent got sick, somebody has cancer, somebody has heart disease, you would talk about that because you'd want that to be a lesson for them about, perhaps cancer runs your family, you need to have checkups, or perhaps you have high cholesterol, you've eaten a poor eater, you want to change your diet. You would use that as a teachable moment for your children. So I think when it comes to money and legacy, it's that same thing. How, when you're around, can you sort of break that fourth wall and talk about, what you're doing and explain to them that this is what matters to you? And that, I think, will be the legacy that will help carry them forward when you're older or when you're gone.
It's interesting, in the money coaching we're doing, one of the archetypes, there's money archetypes, characters within us. And, my wife growing up was the innocent. They never talk about money. And what you're talking about is if you do that, all of a sudden they may become an avoider later on in life. They may not be able to know how to handle money. When a bill comes or it's at the end of the month, they're not opening up that checkbook. Now, do you want that? Now, on the flip side, you may be a tyrant where all you talk about is money, and it's just like so overwhelming to the child. The child gets that pattern and they grow up out of fear and out of like anger and that. So there is a happy balance. And I really do think money is one of those last taboos in society right now.
At the same time, well, being that we 10 through 26, our children, 25, and being married 27 years, that's a long time.
A lot of S&Ps.
I feel like we've made a lot of mistakes. It's like sometimes you talk about it too much and then they get stressed about it or whatever. You pull back. You're like, all right, let me protect them from it, to the point where you're not even talking about it and they have no idea, like you said. And so I think it's important for us parents to realize that we do go through those moments of right now in our life. We're very open with them about what's going on, especially in the money world, I think, because of the money coaching. But I think it's a good time. But I'm noticing that some of them get stressed when we talk about it. You know what I mean? And so it's almost like you have to learn your children. Each one of them is different, kind of like the love languages. All the kids are different. They want more attention differently. And they also need to be talked to differently. And so sometimes it gets overwhelming. And as a parent, especially as a dad, sometimes you don't know how to handle those situations.
A couple of things come to mind there. The first is, we got connected here through Dr. Brad Klontz, a good friend of mine. He's been on your show as well. Great guy. And he gives this example, which I love. And it's husband, wife, 2 kids. They're about to lose the house. Scenario 1, mom and dad figure out how to keep the house. They do it all on their own. Scenario 2, grandma and grandpa come in and help them save the house. Scenario 3, they lose the house. Same event, 3 very different outcomes. And for that, you're going to have 3 different reactions if you're their kids. I mean, that's just the nature, of life. And if your kids, we're never always going to get it right as a parent. But if you've talked about it, they'll remember that later on. Like, I'm making them remember when mom and dad were really stressed about money. Well, I'm kind of stressed about money. But then a couple years later, mom and dad weren't stressed about money. And so having that cycle is so important, because it'd be really bad if you were, and this is obviously a lot of people, always stressed about money. That's going to program differently. But if you never had a concern in the world about money, they're going to go out on their own and have a very different view as to how the world works. And a second thing that comes to mind is, we live outside New York City, a really nice town, kids go to nice schools. But my oldest daughter just got back from a mission trip to Appalachia, to Eastern Kentucky. And you can tell your kids as much as you want that, how we live is not how everybody lives. And people have different challenges, and they can go see, their cousins, but their cousins are both, school teachers, like school teachers. So it's not the same. Like, it's like school teachers do perfectly fine. They live like, they went to, Martin, Kentucky. My daughter went to Martin, Kentucky, and she calls me at one point and she says, this woman, we're rebuilding her house. It was, flooded by the river, putting insulation and all this, but she doesn't want to come to our dinner on the last night. And I said, oh, well, maybe she's shy. That, I don't know why. Why is that? And she says, well, my daughter says, well, she had to have all of her teeth pulled and she's really self-conscious. And I said, oh, well, okay, that's understandable. She said, yeah, but Dad, she said it would cost $1,000 to get her teeth fixed, and she didn't have $1,000. Now, that's not, if my daughter needed $1,000 worth of dental work, okay, that'd be fine. We'll get it done. But that was something that made such an impression on her. Way more, back to what I was saying before, like we can talk and talk and talk, but kids have to see it. That made an impression on her way more than my wife and I trying to explain to her, the socioeconomic differences around America.
Wow.
That's amazing.
I'll share a quick story with you that happened to me actually. Was it yesterday? 2 days ago. I was actually humbled. We are doing this money bio with our children, and we're asking our children to remember earliest memories of money. And I thought I'm a great dad. I'm making mistakes and this and that.
Time out. You are a great
time out. But in this juncture, one of my children came up to me and said, yeah, I remember early on Dad saying we couldn't afford it. It was too expensive. And now she said that she developed a pattern that when she goes to spend money, sometimes she gets anxious about spending money. And me, being in great fashion, got defensive right away, saying, that's not right. And I'm like, wow, that's me being defensive. And I just felt very responsible for letting my child down back then. And there's nothing that I can do. That's where I was at that point in my life. And that's what came out. But great learning lesson was, hey, I sat down. I said, I'm really sorry. That was me back then. I didn't mean to overreact. That was the way I react because I am very defensive. When I was younger, being made fun of, being always being blamed for things. And I understood that. And that's why the work is so important, working on yourself and then having that connection and being really transparent and vulnerable with your child and saying, hey, I'm sorry. And because I don't want her to develop my pattern of that, even though I have, by every measure, we're wealthy now, but that still comes up in her subconscious. And I don't want her to have that feeling. So that was pretty cool. It was very humbling for me. It was very difficult to go through that.
Great moment.
Look at it this way. When you talk about legacy, you got to talk to her about that now. So, you got to have the conversation and you could sort of explain it. One of the things we've tried really hard to do with our kids, and again, the oldest is about to turn 16, is we've tried to avoid using words like expensive or inexpensive because they always carry some sort of judgment to it. And so when our girls were quite young, a toy store in our town, they sold like a basic Barbie, like not Barbie with a bicycle, not Barbie with a dog, not Barbie, with a slide or a pool. So the basic Barbie for $10. And that was the greatest thing ever, because when kids are learning math, they learn in 10 frames, and that's how they learn to count by tens. And so instead of saying, oh, that car is $50,000, they don't know what $50,000 is. We can say, well, can you imagine having 1,000 Barbie dolls? And that box is like, the whole first floor of the house is filled with Barbie dolls. That's how much you need
that is
to
brilliant.
get the car. And we did this throughout because kids are largely, we all are. As we get older, we get better at this, but kids are very comparative, and they'll go into somebody's home and immediately they'll make a judgment as to whether that home is bigger or smaller than the house. And then every house in the world is bigger or smaller than the house that you live in. And when our daughter came home, we did kind of similar moment to what you're saying. Our daughter came home and she had this friend he was a vice chairman of investment banking at a large investment bank. And she went to his house, which could have eaten our house many times and swallowed it whole. And she came back and said, why is their house so much bigger than ours? And now the first reaction my daughter and I have is like, she's 4 years old, like, oh my God, we're creating a horrible spoiled kid. She wants a bigger house. What are we going to do here? This is awful. And instead it was just an honest question. And so we said, well, Mr. So-and-so does this for a living and he earns more money. And Mr. So-and-so, this is how he chooses to spend his money. And then it became a conversation more about choice because, as if I set this up, not a month later, she went to a house of somebody. They were school teachers. They met at her school and their house was smaller than ours. And so okay, I understand why their house is smaller. But we were fortunate enough, and I don't want to say like we've done this all the time. Every parent makes tons of mistakes. Every parent remembers all the mistakes far more often than all the successes. But we pumped the brakes and thought, why is she asking that question and what is she really trying to get at?
Well, Paul, if you're married to Julia, she'll remind you of
I'll
all the
remind
mistakes
you.
and mistakes
Yeah,
that
I
it
have a
makes.
good
But what I would say about that Barbie analogy, I would
love
also
that.
say the other way you can do it is if your daughter's, getting paid $20 an hour to scoop up poop and she does it for 2 hours, it's $40. If it costs 4 hours to buy something, you can do it from that relation too. Is wow, I'm making $20 an hour and that, bike costs me $200. Then it costs me 10 hours of poop cleaning to buy that bike. Is it worth it? That's another way to break it down. And even for you adults out there, it's a really good metric to understand your value and the cost of something. And I wouldn't go for Barbies. I would use.
I love the Barbie analogy. I think Laura would love.
We're using Barbies, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had, I said in the book that, oftentimes, middle class people, they're talking more about the decisions they're going to make around money. So, for example, you have a 15-year-old Honda, and it needs to be repaired, and it's going to cost $3,000 to have it repaired. But a new Honda is going to be a $400 a month car payment. You've really loved not having a car payment, but now you got to shell out money. What if 6 months, you got to put another $5,000 into it? Those are conversations that get had at the dinner table because that car is a need, not a want. And there's this guy I talked to, he was in South Florida. I don't know if he made it in the book or not, but every 3 years he would buy a new Range Rover. And he was very aware of the message that this was sending to his daughter. So he began to say, I know Range Rovers cost more than $100,000 now, but I think, let's say back then it cost $100,000. He said, okay, here's my brand new Range, because it just would show up. It wasn't a need, it was a want, and he wanted a new one. So just show up in the driveway. His daughter, oh, here's a new Range Rover. He would say, this $100,000 car, well, for me to buy it, I have to make $200,000. Why do you have to make $200,000? Well, because we have taxes. Oh, okay. And then my insurance on this is, $3,000 a year. I have to work this much for this. Now, because I have a Range Rover and not a Toyota, I have to put premium gasoline in it. And he had this conversation, and I always remember this guy. And years later, his daughter moved to New York and reached out and said, here's what I'm doing. I'd love to talk to you. I was like, I will 100% meet you because I've always wanted to meet you because I remember, the story that your dad told me about you 15 years earlier.
Yeah, that is awesome. Where do you see the company going? What's the goal with dads? What's your mission or your big vision statement for your company?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to be the go-to resource for fatherhood, and there are lots of resources out there for moms. Most of the resources for parents are really geared toward moms. So as dads want to be more involved, I want to come to the company of dads. We created this whole resource library, and is it any different than every other resource library out there? Not really. Except for one thing. And that one thing is it's written by dads for dads. So you take a dad approach to all of this. And how do you normalize this role? You can still be masculine and be a great caregiver. And so we wanted to the point, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, there's no such thing as a lead dad anymore. You're just a dad. And by implication, you're leading your family, you're leading your own life. And you come to the company of dads because you're 27 years old, you just had your first child, you don't know what the heck to do, and we have all the resources for it.
Julia, as Paul is giving out his information to where people can learn more about him, I want him to envision you getting on top of Guido, riding on the donkey and saying, Paul, thanks. You could possibly ride. I think, Lucy's big. Lucy's big. Paul, just think about that, okay? Just have that vision. And as you're thinking about that, where can the listeners get a hold of you? Where can they get more information about the companies?
I can't even think of my name right now after this. I hope I get like a Christmas card with your whole family, including the donkeys and the chickens and everyone.
Yes.
Easiest way to find is thecompanyofdads.com. We encourage people who want to know more to sign up for the newsletter, The Dad. That's just as easy. thecompanyofdads.com/The Dad. Comes out once a week, every Sunday morning in your inbox. Gives you an overview of what's happened the past week.
Baby, bring us home, baby.
I just want to ask one more question, and then you can do the final, because turtles. I want to go back to turtles for a second. Did you buy your daughter a pet turtle or even a stuffed turtle to remember the story?
No, I didn't. Back then, we had 3 dogs, 3 cats, and 3 fish.
Like a fake turtle.
And you're judging me for having a couple donkeys? You got like 17 animals in the house. I mean,
what a gift that
add them all up, and they don't weigh as much as one miniature donkey.
Okay, got me.
You're so lovable, though.
Wow. Listen, from one dad to another, I know the work is incredibly important. It truly is. We sometimes feel like we're isolated. If you are that dad who needs the community, who needs the outreach, emails, box, that's not important. What Paul's doing is he's building a community of dads. And I think the vision that he's set for himself is not just to be for that dad, that lead dad. He wants it for all dads, because I think he wants to change the language around it. And a dad can be stay-at-home dad, can be a work dad. We can blend the whole thing together. It doesn't have to be like it was 50, 60 years ago. And I love this new version of what you're working on, Paul. Thanks for being on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on. I can honestly say I will never, ever forget this podcast. I will remember you and your donkeys forever. So thank you for giving
Maybe
that
you'll
gift
be getting
to
a
me.
mini in the mail.
Thanks again, Paul. We appreciate it. And we'll see you all on the next Julie and Gino podcast. Take care, everyone.